At Thanksgiving dinner, my father humiliated me in front of our entire family, then grounded me like a child. Everyone laughed, I smiled, said one word, and walked away. By the next morning, his life started falling apart. I'm Tori Brennan. I'm 29 years old. Last Thanksgiving, I made one mistake in my father's eyes. I asked what my grandmother had left me in her will. My father, Richard Brennan, retired judge, family authority, stood up, raised his voice, and treated me like I was 12 years old. He told me I was grounded. At 29. 30 relatives laughed. I felt my face burn, but I didn't argue. I just looked at him and said, "All right." The next morning, he knocked on my bedroom door. Smug. "Finally learned your place," he said. Then he opened the door. The room was empty. No clothes, no bags, no me. Before he could call my phone, the doorbell rang. Standing outside was the family attorney, pale, shaking, holding a briefcase my father had never seen before. "Mr. Brennan," the lawyer said, "what have you done? Let me rewind. 2 months earlier, my grandmother passed away quietly in a Portland hospital. She was 87. When I arrived, my father wasn't grieving. He was already on the phone discussing paperwork. My brother stood beside him like a political ally. At the funeral, my father spoke at length about legacy and tradition. He praised my brother. He never mentioned me. After the service, an older man with silver hair and wire-rim glasses shook my hand and whispered, "Your grandmother was very proud of you. I'll be in touch." Then he disappeared. My father raised his glass and announced that he would manage everything from the estate. Then he looked directly at me. "Don't worry about any of it, Tori. Complex matters aren't really your strength." I went upstairs to the bedroom I grew up in. Out of habit, I opened the nightstand drawer. Inside was an envelope. My name was written on it in my grandmother's handwriting. Inside was a letter and part of a legal document. The letter said everything my grandmother never dared say out loud. She warned me my father would try to take control. She told me not to trust anyone, not even my mother. And she gave me one name, Harold Caldwell. Attached was proof, part of an irrevocable trust, naming me as the beneficiary. Not enough pages to use in court, but enough to know she was telling the truth. I went back to my tiny studio apartment and tried to ignore it. I needed work. I needed money. I still had student loans. Then I saw an email, accidentally forwarded to me by my brother. Subject line, Trust Amendment Draft Petition. He and my father were already trying to remove me as beneficiary. They called me financially unstable, unreliable, unfit. The last line from my brother broke something in me. She won't fight it. She never does. That night, I backed up every email and made one decision. I called Harold Caldwell. He was the man from the funeral. He told me the truth my father never expected me to hear. 8 years earlier, my grandmother created an irrevocable trust with me as the sole beneficiary. Over $600,000. Legally untouchable. She even had a medical evaluation done the same week, proving she was fully competent. Then Harold leaned forward and said, "Your father already filed paperwork to change the beneficiary. He told the court he couldn't find you." That's when I smiled, because Thanksgiving was coming. Back in the present, my father stood frozen in the doorway of my empty bedroom as the lawyer waited downstairs, with documents that would expose everything, and that's the moment he realized something terrifying. I wasn't grounded, I wasn't confused, and I wasn't small anymore. He read the email chain slowly. No reaction. Then he looked up. "This is clear evidence of a breach of fiduciary duty," Harold said calmly. "If you want to challenge this, you can win." "I do," I said. He nodded once, then, almost casually, added, "There's something else. Your grandmother also placed the Cannon Beach cottage into the trust." I froze. The little cedar house by the ocean, the place where summers smelled like salt and wood smoke, where we watched Haystack Rock glow gold at sunset. She left it to me. Harold folded the file. "Your grandmother spent 8 years preparing for this. The only question is when you want to act." "Thanksgiving," I said. "The whole family will be there." He studied me, then nodded. "All right." The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, I packed light. One coat, one change of clothes, a toothbrush, and a folder filled with notarized copies. The originals stayed locked in Harold's office. I drove through Oregon's rust-colored hills toward the Brennan house. From the outside, it looked perfect. That was always the point. My mother hugged me too tightly at the door. "Your father's in the study," she whispered. "He's tense." Upstairs, my childhood room looked untouched. I slid the folder under the mattress and stared out the window at my grandmother's neglected garden. "I'm here," I whispered. Thanksgiving morning felt like opening night. By noon, 32 relatives filled the house. Laughter, wine, noise everywhere. I helped in the kitchen because no one asked me to do anything else. At 4 o'clock, we sat down. The main table gleamed with silver and candles. I was placed at a folding table near the wall. My father stood to speak. "This year has been difficult," he said, voice echoing. "But the Brennan family endures, and I'm especially proud of my son, Garrett." Applause. Someone called out, "What about Tori?" My father didn't look at me. "She's still figuring things out," he said. "Creative, that counts for something." Laughter rippled across the room. I sat still, calm, ready. After dinner, my father stood again, this time turning toward me. "Tori," he said loudly, "it's time you understood your limitations." That's when I stood. "I think it's time you read something," I said. The room went quiet. I walked to him and placed the folder on the table. The family lawyer arrived minutes later, uninvited, unexpected, undeniable. By the time my father finished reading, his face had drained of color. The trust was irrevocable. The beneficiary was me. And the beach house wasn't his. For the first time in my life, Richard Brennan had no words. I sat still, hands folded in my lap. The 9-year-old beside me leaned over and whispered, "Are you okay?" I nodded and passed him a bread roll. After dessert, after the port wine loosened tongues, my father stood again. The room quieted instantly. "Tomorrow morning," he announced, "I'll be making an important statement about my mother's estate. I expect everyone here." He smiled. The kind of smile that assumes victory. I caught my brother's expression. Calm. Confident. My mother stared at the table. Tomorrow, my father was going to read his version of the will. I excused myself to the kitchen. Warm water ran over my hands as I scrubbed pans alone. Behind me, laughter rolled through the house. No one offered to help. Footsteps. Garrett leaned in the doorway, wineglass dangling. "You should be grateful Dad even lets you sit at the table," he said. "Even if it's the kids' table." I didn't turn around. "Garrett," I said quietly, "do you know what Grandma left me?" The silence shifted. His glass tapped the counter. When I looked back, his face had gone flat. He left without a word. Minutes later, my father's voice boomed from the living room. "Tori, in here, now." 32 faces turned toward me. My father stood in the center of the room, finger pointed like a gavel. "What did you say to your brother?" he demanded. "Are you trying to manipulate this family?" Before I could speak, he cut me off. "You're grounded," he said. "Go to your room until you apologize." The room exploded, not in protest, but laughter. Grown adults laughing as a 29-year-old woman was sent upstairs like a child. My mother said nothing. I looked at my father, held his gaze. "All right," I said calmly. I went upstairs, closed the door, and made one phone call. "Mr. Caldwell," I said, "I need you here tomorrow morning, with the originals." There was a pause. "I'll be there," he replied. I set my alarm for 4 a.m. and listened to the laughter drift through the floorboards. Enjoy it, I thought. This is the last time. I left before dawn. No noise, no goodbye. I took my bag, the folder, and nothing else, except one framed photo of my grandmother, which I left face down on the nightstand. I waited at a diner nearby until my phone buzzed. "Garrett, where are you? Dad's looking for you." I didn't respond. Later, my cousin told me what happened. At 7:30, my father went upstairs, ready to demand an apology. He opened the door. The room was empty, the bed made, the closet cleared. 10 seconds passed before his face changed. "She ran," he announced downstairs, "like a coward." Garrett smiled. "Well, that settles it." My father nodded. "It does." Then the doorbell rang. My mother opened the door to find an older man in a gray suit holding a leather briefcase. "I'm Harold Caldwell," he said, "attorney for Eleanor Brennan. I need to speak with everyone." Silence spread through the house as he entered. He set the briefcase on the dining table and opened it. "Tori Brennan," he said evenly, "is the sole beneficiary of an irrevocable trust executed 8 years ago." My father stood. "You weren't invited." "This house was built with Eleanor Brennan's money," Caldwell replied, "and I'm here under legal obligation." He removed the documents. "There was no cognitive decline," he continued. "There was medical verification, witnesses, and intent." Then he looked at my father. Would you like me to read it all aloud? The room held its breath. My father stared at the folder in Caldwell's hands, like a man looking down the barrel of a loaded gun. Then he straightened his shoulders. Get out of my house. Caldwell didn't move. Sir, he said quietly, what have you done? That was the moment the mask cracked. Not slowly, not politely, but all at once. My father stepped closer. You're trespassing. I'll call the police. You're welcome to, Caldwell replied evenly. And when they arrive, I'll show them the petition you filed 3 weeks ago, claiming you couldn't locate the beneficiary. He paused. The beneficiary whose phone number you have, whose address you have, who slept in this house last night. Color drained from my father's face, red to white to something gray and unfamiliar. Around the room, the truth began to spread. Hands over mouths, brows knitting, quiet glances exchanged. Then Garrett stood, smooth, controlled, the fixer. These documents can be contested, he said. Through proper legal, you drafted the petition. Caldwell interrupted. Silence. You prepared a filing to change the beneficiary of an irrevocable trust on behalf of your father. He turned slightly. I have the emails. Garrett's composure didn't break. It vanished. Dad, he said under his breath, we need to talk. I have nothing to hide, my father snapped. That's when Aunt Margaret stood. Richard, she said calmly, let the man speak. A murmur followed, not rebellion, recognition. My father looked around and realized something terrifying. The audience he'd gathered wasn't on his side anymore. This is absurd, he said, but the power was gone from his voice. This lawyer was hired when my mother was declining. I served Eleanor Brennan for 20 years, Caldwell cut in, and I'm here because you violated your duty as trustee. Out, my father said, his voice cracking. Get out, or I'll have you arrested. Caldwell closed his briefcase with a soft, deliberate click. I'll leave, he said calmly, but I'll return at 2 o'clock for the estate reading you scheduled. He paused at the door. And I won't be coming alone. This is a misunderstanding, he said. Tori hired someone to stir trouble. It's what she does. People nodded. The room exhaled. Normalcy returned. Or so he thought. 2 o'clock was 5 hours away. I sat in my car outside a coffee shop, rain tracing lines down the windshield. Invisibility was exactly what I needed. At 9:41 a.m., the email arrived. U.S. Bank confirmed it in writing. I was the sole beneficiary. The money was untouched. The petition had failed. I saved it, backed it up, printed it. At 11:15, Caldwell called. He threw me out, he said dryly. I know, I replied. 2 o'clock. Are you sure? He asked. Once this happens, there's no going back. I watched a woman pass by holding a child's hand, both laughing in the rain. I've been going back my whole life, I said. I'm done. Inside the house, the mood had shifted. People talked, but listened harder. Smiles came slower. Aunt Margaret questioned my mother. My cousins stayed put. My father made call after call. No lawyer answered. By noon, even Garrett knew the lifeboat was leaking. At 12:30, I sat across from Caldwell one last time. He laid everything out. The original trust, the medical evaluation, the emails, the bank confirmation, my grandmother's letter. Everything is real, he said. At 1:45, I closed the folder. At 2:00, I drove back to the house. And this time, I wasn't walking in alone. The last page lay on top, one sentence highlighted in yellow. Won't fight it. Beneath it, a letter from U.S. Bank confirming the intact trust. $620,000, sole beneficiary. Me. Then Caldwell slid over a fourth document. The deed, he said. Hawthorne Street. I stared at it. The house was Eleanor's, he continued. Purchased in 1981. Before your grandfather. Your father never owned it. He just assumed he did. The room felt suddenly smaller. Under the trust, Caldwell said, tapping the page. Ownership transfers to the beneficiary. Me. He doesn't know, I said. He never read past page 3, Caldwell replied. The page that named him trustee. Of course. I gathered the copies. I go in first. You follow my signal. He nodded. You'll know. At 1:45, I drove down Hawthorne Street again. Rain-glossed pavement. Bare oak branches etched against a pale sky. This was where Grandma taught me to ride a bike, where she knelt in the dirt and said, take the whole root ball, don't leave any part behind. My phone buzzed. Tori, my mother whispered. Your father is furious. Just apologize. I'm coming home, I said. Just not to do that. The house was full. 30 people. chairs pulled tight, facing the fireplace like a courtroom. My father stood in front, glasses on, holding a single sheet of paper like a verdict. "The trust will be consolidated under my management," he announced. $620,000 to Garrett. A pause. "And for Tori, $5,000. Sympathetic murmurs. That's when I stepped in. Behind me, the front door closed softly. Caldwell entered. My father's face flickered. Surprise, irritation, control. "Are you here to apologize?" he asked. "No," I said. "I'm here for the real will." I crossed the room and placed the folder on the table. "This," I said, facing everyone, "is my grandmother's irrevocable trust. What you just heard was something my father wrote himself." Silence. Real silence. Caldwell opened his briefcase and lifted the original document. Notary seal bright red. "Executed 8 years ago," he said evenly. "Sole beneficiary, Victoria Brennan." A ripple moved through the room. "The trust includes $620,000 held by U.S. Bank," he continued, "and the property at Hawthorne Street." Someone gasped. "The house transfers in full to the beneficiary." My father didn't sit down. He couldn't. "As trustee," Caldwell finished, "Richard Brennan had no authority to change any of this." No one spoke, because in that moment, everyone understood the same thing. The house, the money, the truth had never been his. "Without the beneficiary's written consent," Caldwell finished. He lowered the document and faced my father. "In the last 3 months," he said, "Mr. Brennan filed a petition to change the beneficiary to his son, claiming he could not locate Miss Brennan. He also failed to notify her of the trust after Eleanor's death, which Oregon law requires." He produced another sheet. Emails, yellow highlights visible from across the room. "These are communications between Richard Brennan and Garrett Brennan. Garrett drafted the petition. Richard approved it." Caldwell read one line aloud. "She won't fight it. She never does. That's the beauty of it." Every head turned to Garrett. My brother sat frozen, his hand still on Meredith's arm. Meredith slowly pulled away and folded her hands in her lap. Aunt Margaret shook her head. Uncle Don muttered. Danny stood up and came to stand beside me. No words, just presence. My father tried again. "She was confused," he said. "Your mother didn't know what she was signing." Caldwell didn't miss a beat. "Eleanor Brennan underwent a cognitive evaluation the same week the trust was executed." He placed the report on the table. 93rd percentile for her age. Silence. Then Great Aunt Judith spoke from the back. "Eleanor told me," she said softly, 8 years ago. She said Richard would try to take it, but she made sure he couldn't." My father looked around the room. The respect was gone. He turned on Garrett. "Say something. Contest it." Garrett didn't look up. "Dad, irrevocable means irrevocable. I told you that." My father slammed his hand into a chair. "You said she'd never find out." And there it was, confirmed, out loud, in front of everyone. The wine glass slipped from his hand and shattered. No one moved. Then he shifted. The voice softened. The shoulders dropped. "Tori, sweetheart," he said. "I was protecting the family. You're young. I was doing this because I love you." I let the silence stretch. "You didn't do this because you love me," I said. "You did it because you never believed a daughter deserved the same as a son." My mother stood. "You owe her an apology, Richard," she said. "You've owed her one her entire life." He said nothing. He turned and closed the study door. After that, the room changed. Aunt Margaret hugged me. "Your grandmother would be so proud." Danny squeezed my shoulder. "You were always the strongest. You just never had to prove it." Some cousins apologized. Some stared at the floor. A few left quietly, like people exiting a room where something has broken. Garrett walked out without looking back. Meredith paused, unclasped her pearl necklace, and slipped it into her pocket, suddenly smaller. Caldwell closed his briefcase. "I'll file to remove him as trustee Monday," he said. "The trust is frozen until then." The clock on the mantel read 2:47 p.m. 30 years ended in 47 minutes. Monday morning, Caldwell filed 3 documents. Richard Brennan was removed as trustee. Caldwell was appointed interim trustee, and Garrett Brennan was reported to the Oregon State Bar for ethical violations. Richard didn't contest it. His own attorney told him the truth. Irrevocable means irrevocable. Within weeks, the $620,000 transferred to an account in my name. The deed to 4714 Hawthorne Street was updated. The house, the garden, the table my grandmother built a family around. Mine. Garrett received formal notice of investigation. His largest client dropped him days later. And for the first time in my life, the Brennan family story stopped being written about me and started being written by me. The complaint became semi-public within days. Garrett quietly pivoted into corporate consulting. No courtroom, no bar license, no explanations required. My father called me once. 3 days after the filing. I answered because some small part of me still thought he might say the words. He didn't. "You've destroyed this family," he said. "No," I told him. "You did. I just brought the receipts." He hung up. I haven't heard from him since. 2 weeks later, I drove to Hawthorne Street with a single brass key Caldwell slid across his desk. "It's yours," he'd said. For some reason, those 2 words undid me more than everything else combined. The oak trees were bare now. The iron gate creaked the way it always had. The porch steps, cedar over old pine, still held my grandmother's faded fern-patterned mat. When I opened the door, the smell hit first. Wood polish, old books, lavender sachets. The house was silent in a way it never had been before. Without my father's voice filling every room, the house breathed differently, like it was finally resting. I walked it slowly. The living room. The dining room with faint wine rings still on the oak table. The kitchen where I'd always cleaned alone. My old bedroom. My grandmother's room. Her chair by the window, her glasses folded on the table. Then the garden. The peonies were brown and tangled, the stone path nearly swallowed by leaves. I knelt and pressed my hands into the cold soil. "I'll fix it," I whispered. "I promise." And I knew I would. A week later, I drove west to Cannon Beach. 6 years since I'd last been there. The cottage was smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was bigger now. Weathered cedar, salt air you could taste, the porch wrapping around 2 sides like an embrace. Inside, the scent was still hers. Lavender, cedar, paperbacks. On the kitchen table sat a wooden box, placed deliberately. Inside, photographs. Me and my grandmother, year after year, in this place. Rain boots, driftwood forts, wind-burned smiles. Beneath them, a short letter. "Tori, if you're reading this, you were brave enough. This house was always yours. I was just keeping it warm. Start over here if you need to. I am so proud of you. Always." I cried on that porch. Not the tight, careful crying I'd learned as a kid. The kind that opens something instead of closing it. The ocean didn't care about courtrooms or wills. Haystack Rock had been standing there for millions of years. That helped. That Sunday night back in Portland, I sat at the oak table and wrote one email. I sent it without over-editing, because some things need to stay sharp. I don't want to cut anyone out, but I won't return to relationships built on dismissal or hierarchy. If you want to know me, it will be with mutual respect. The door is open. It swings both ways now. My mother called 20 minutes later. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have protected you." "I know," I told her, "but I need you to choose what's right now, not what's easy." After a long pause, she said, "I'm going to try." Garrett texted the next morning. "I understand." I didn't reply. Understanding is not the same thing as accountability. 6 months later, spring returned to Portland. The peonies came back. I paid off my student loans, every last dollar. Leased a small studio in the Alberta Arts District. Brennan Landscape Design went on the door. At Hawthorne Street, I turned my father's old study into a design studio. Legal books out, seed catalogs in, soil samples on the shelves, rewriting, in the most literal way. Danny helped on weekends. Aunt Margaret called every Sunday. My mother visited alone for the first time. We planted tulips without saying much. Richard rented an apartment across town. According to family gossip, I'd stolen the house. The story changed depending on the audience. Richard Brennan was always the victim. Some things, I suppose, are truly irrevocable. Garrett's suspension lasted 6 months. He stayed in consulting. His marriage ended quietly. He never reached out again. I left the door open. I just stopped standing in it. I'm telling you this now from the porch of the Cannon Beach cottage. It's Saturday. The tide is out. The wind smells like salt and cedar. For the first time in my life, I'm not waiting for anyone's permission. And that's what my grandmother really left me. Haystack Rock is still doing what it has done for millions of years, standing solid, ancient, and completely indifferent to human drama. I come here when I need to remember what quiet feels like. The cottage is just as my grandmother left it. The only thing I've added is a small herb garden by the steps. Rosemary, thyme, lavender. Plants that don't break in the wind. They get stronger. I'm not telling this story to give advice. Every family is its own country, with its own rules and unspoken wars. Only the people inside know the real borders. I can't tell you what to do with your parents, your siblings, or your inheritance. I can only tell you what I learned. Silence is not consent. I spent most of my life quiet, at dinner tables, in arguments, in rooms where my voice wasn't welcome. The people around me mistook that silence for agreement. It wasn't. It was someone waiting until she had proof. Waiting isn't weakness either. My father and my brother assumed I wouldn't fight back. They were almost right. What they didn't understand is the difference between someone who can't fight and someone who is choosing the moment to do it. What my grandmother gave me wasn't money, it wasn't the trust, it wasn't the house. She gave me evidence, proof that someone in my family truly saw me. Not the version they could control, but the real one. And she protected that version of me the only way that mattered, with preparation, with documents, with plans made years in advance. That kind of love doesn't just say, I believe in you. It makes sure no one can erase you. I still have the old Frank Lloyd Wright poster I taped to my wall when I was 16. It hangs in my studio now, curling at the edges. Every morning I look at it and think about the girl who wanted to build things and was told it wasn't enough. She was enough. She always was. She just needed the paperwork to prove it. Early one spring morning, I'm in the hawthorn garden, planting peonies, the same kind my grandmother loved. Sarah Bernhardt. Pink, dramatic, tougher than they look. I press the soil down the way she taught me. Take the whole root, leave nothing behind. The sun rises over the roofline. Somewhere my coffee is getting cold. Somewhere else my father is waking up and telling himself a version of the story where he's the victim. Then I notice something on the porch. An envelope. No stamp. Just my name. Inside, one sentence. I'm sorry I never stood up for you. I'm standing now. Mom. I fold the letter and place it beside the one from my grandmother, the one I carry everywhere. Two women. One who planned ahead. One who finally caught up. I step inside the house my grandmother protected. The house my father lost. The house that always belonged to someone willing to take care of it. I close the door, and for the first time in my life, it feels like home.